Welcome to an episode of the Superpowered Fancast. This is Darren. This month, I had the pleasure of talking to another one of my favorite modern comic book writers, Matthew Rosenberg, and I was stoked that he reached out to me. Matthew Rosenberg is a writer of comics like Punisher, Hawkeye Freefall, Phoenix Resurrection, DC vs. Vampires, What's the Furthest Place from Here, and Four Kids Walk Into a Bank, which is being turned into a feature film starring Liam Neeson, Jim Sturgis, and Talia Ryder. His next series is We're Taking Everyone Down With Us, coming from Image Comics. I get to talk with Matthew about the new series and his comic book journey in this episode, and I'm excited to hear what you think. Matthew Rosenberg, thank you so much for being on the Superpowered Fancast. I really appreciate it, and I am a huge fan, so I'm definitely going to fanboy, and I apologize in advance. So I'm just letting you know.
Well, thank you for having me, and yeah, I'll try not to be too awkward with that.
Okay, I'm
But
sorry because I have a lot of questions, but I really want to talk about We're Taking Everyone Down With Us because that's the newest comic you have coming out. But I kind of want to lead into that by the first thing I want to ask. I usually ask this, especially of writers, especially comic book writers, was kind of what was your comic book journey, and what are kind of some of the titles and stories that inspired you when you started writing?
sure, yeah. I mean, my journey as a fan starts when before I could read practically. My older brother had comics, and he'd do the normal like, don't touch them, don't even look at them thing. And so as soon as he would leave the room, as soon as he would go outside, I'd run into his room and grab those books and read them. And I really learned to read on, issues of X-Men and Superman and stuff. Um, and then I grew up in New York City, and I grew up with a comic book store on my block. So that was pretty much like, very detrimental to my being into anything else. That was the easiest place to get to. Is the first place I literally ever went on my own because I could just cross the street and go get comics. Um, and I was a fan my whole life, and I wanted to make comics like a lot of little kids when I was 11 and 12, and I couldn't draw like I wanted to. I wanted to be, Jim Lee or Todd McFarlane or Eric Larson, and I couldn't draw like any of them, and so I, in frustration, gave it up, and I never thought about making comics again for the rest of my childhood and my early adulthood, and I worked in the music business for a while. And then I was just getting really burnt out on that. It's a pretty brutal industry, and the only thing I liked as much as music is comics. And so I was like, well, I guess I want to try and make comics, but I don't know how. I didn't know anything about it. But the the books that were really inspiring me to do stuff, I was really into. I was obviously a big like Alan Moore fan and Brian K. Vaughan. But Brian Bendis was like a revelation for me when I read I guess I read like when Powers started. Powers was like the big one. Like I'd read some of the crime stuff before, but Powers was like I got hit by a bolt of lightning. And I just was super passionate about comics at that point. Excuse me. I I was like I was super I'd always read comics. I never didn't had a period where I didn't read comics. But stuff like Powers, and there was sort of a really good resurgence of books around that time of indie comics that I was really into. But actually the thing that made me think I could make comics is a little weird, but it's was Steve Niles, the writer. He I was a big fan. I love 30 Days a Night. I love Gray Matter, and I love the Cal McDonald books. And I found out that he was in a band called Gray Matter that they broke up when I was a little kid, but they were a band I really loved. I discovered them when I was older, and they were like a punk band and sort of in the same world that I was coming from. And so that was like a revelation to me to be like, oh, someone else went from music to comics and I could do that. So that was a big thing. I mean, I love Steve's writing, but like just his career path was a huge inspiration for me.
Yeah, there was a part of me, and like, as soon as you said Steve Niles, I started thinking of, and 30 Days a Night, I started thinking of DC versus vampires. I was like,
Sure.
okay, I was like that. I mean, I could kind of see like not similarities, but I could kind of see kind of like a little, maybe a little bit of inspiration. Um,
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I love Steve's work and everything he's ever done. And actually, it goes deeper than that because he's one of the founders of Black Mask, who published my first books, my first ever short stories with Black Mask, my first work for hire book was at Black Mask, and my first creator-owned book, We Can Never Go Home, was at Black Mask. So like Steve's not only my inspiration for doing this, but also like part of the reason I can do it at all.
and along those lines, as far as kind of getting into the business and writing regularly, something I I like to know, just almost kind of a process question, but I'm not kind of asking. I'm not. I don't want to like dig into everyone's process all the time, but I just kind of like to hear how that creative function works. But when you're writing something like what's the furthest place from here, or we can never go home again, or even we're taking everyone down with us, is it something where you've seen the whole story and you kind of have to break it up, or is it something that you see part of where you want to go, and then just kind of as the story evolves and you write it, it takes you a new and different direction?
So it's a little different project to project. I fully I'm not as comfortable being like a superhero writer in a lot of ways because I can't really tell a story if I don't know what the end is. Like that's sort of the first thing I have to know is like the end is the point. It's what you set out to say. And if I don't know that, then I don't know how to start it. Um, and on a superhero book where they're sometimes like, yeah, go for 2 years, you're like, well, I don't, 2 years, like that's a lot. I can fill 2 years easy, but if they're just like, yeah, it's an ongoing book and you don't know, I tend not to do ongoings because I don't love the open-endedness. It sort of trips me up and I kind of pull away from them. I would rather do something that has a beginning and an end. So in that regard, like I always know the ending, I always know the beginning, and then it depends on the book. Like Four Kids Walk into a Bank, We Can Never Go Home. Like I knew what everything was pretty much, and there's a little adjusting on like the number of issues and where to break it, but I knew what it was. But on a book like What's the Furthest Place from Here, we knew the ending and we were like, we're either going to do this in 6 issues, 15 issues, or 30 issues.
Right.
And what basically, like, we kind of knew what 15 issues was. And we were like, well, if the book does well and we can do 30, a lot of it is going to be us learning and figuring out what we're doing as we go, like kind of exploring and just letting the story take us to some places with like little things along the way of like, well, it would be nice to do this and we'd like to do this. Um, which is challenging. It's hard for me. I love it, but it is like driving without a map. Like you're just kind of winging it, and that's really really fun, but also can be really scary and when it's a big project. But yeah, I mean it changes. I try and switch it up creatively just to keep myself interested, you know. I'm always changing how I do things and my approach to things. I'm not like I have a lot of routines, but in terms of like how I approach a book, I kind of always try and approach it a little differently each time.
Okay. So, and then along those same lines, so when you're doing, something that like fully out of your mind, like that was the kind of the process that you were talking about, and you kind of change it up. But when you're doing, established characters, or if you're doing something like Hawkeye Freefall or
Mhm.
something like that, is that something that is that almost kind of like a palate cleanser, where it's like, you know what, I've got the, everyone's already like it's the kind of the tools have already put in place. I just get to play with them for a while.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that's definitely a very real thing of like it's really nice to do a story where you don't have to you don't have to it's very hard to make people fall in love with characters. And when you do a superhero book, when you do a big two book, like most of the audience already loves that character. Like they're showing up to a Hawkeye, they're showing up to an X-Men comic, they're showing up to, read about Batman because they love Batman. And so you don't have to do that, and it frees you up to do a lot of stuff. It's not, I wouldn't call it a palate cleanser because it's difficult in a different way. It's not easier. It's in some ways it's harder to do that, to do a book in the constraints of that. But um it is it is refreshing to go back and forth, if not easier. So palette cleanser is not 100% the term, but I don't know what the term would be. It's a nice change of scenery to go back and forth. Yeah.
I got you. So it's almost like, you get to use a different part of yourself or a different part of your brain because you're not necessarily trying to create characters or establish characters. You're just kind of giving your take or your
Yeah.
on a character that you enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's I mean, a different part of the brain is right. It's like a different muscle set. I mean, I think a big thing is like when I do a creator-owned book, when I do my own stuff, my first job is to make people fall in love with the characters. And when you're doing a superhero book, your first job is kind of the opposite. It's to take the characters someplace people don't expect and haven't seen.
Right.
And so while in your own stuff, you're taking the characters someplace no one's ever seen because no one's ever seen the characters before. It's a completely different thing in that like I wrote almost 30 issues of The Punisher, and The Punisher is just like a super hard character to write in a lot of ways
Mhm.
because everyone knows how he will react in every situation. He's a constant. He doesn't change, he doesn't evolve. He has the most extreme, most hard line, most violent reaction to any situation. So the challenge of The Punisher is not having him do something unexpected because he doesn't do that. It's putting him in a situation where the unexpected has to happen.
Right.
And that's like a very different kind of storytelling in a lot of ways. It's a weird like it's like a riddle almost. It's like solving a riddle on how to do stuff like that. And it's true of every character to a degree. Like the audience should know how these characters react to a lot of these situations because they've been reacting to these situations for 20, 50, 80 years. Like you kind of get if your Batman is doing things that no one understands, then you're doing a bad Batman. Like
Right.
that's just the bottom line. So it is a funny, when I started, I would read a ton of interviews with writers I liked to try and get inside their brains and see how it worked. And they were always asked, like, is it different to write your own stuff versus the big two? And they were like, oh, it's totally different. And when I was starting, I was like, what a pretentious answer. And of course, they knew much better than I did. And like, yeah, it's very different. It's a weirdly very different job.
But that's something I've realized in talking to writers myself is that, I always at first I felt bad kind of asking that question, but then I started thinking about it. I was like, well, they're gonna give me a different answer each time. Each writer's gonna give me a different
Yeah.
answer, different perspective. And it's the perspective that I'm interested in, not necessarily the answer. So it's the reason why I keep asking
Sure. Yeah.
it.
No,
But
I get it. Yeah, I think it's funny to like think about how everyone approach it. We all have this same job, all of us comic writers, and all of us approach every facet of it so differently that I think it's a very fascinating thing. I mean, it's something we get together and talk about is like how we approach this stuff because it is different for everyone.
so then along those lines, what kind of we're taking everyone down with us. Like I
Mhm.
read the first issue and so many unique and interesting things that I found in it that I don't want to without spoilers, I would do kind of want to pick your brain a little bit about it. But just
Sure.
what was the what kind of I don't want to keep saying evolve because it starts to feel repetitive. But how did the idea kind of like germinate with in your head? Like
Sure.
you wanted to tell.
Yeah. So the book has a weird origin because it's me and Stefano Landini, and we'd actually worked together on The Punisher a bit, and we we were supposed to do a book at Marvel at the start of the pandemic, and everything was paused, and people, editors were put on furlough, and projects got canceled, and there was just a lot of chaos in that time. Like, there was a minute where no books were being distributed and no one could get books printed, and it was really chaotic. And our book was paused, and we'd already started it, and Stefano was doing designs, and I was working on a script, and then it was given to a different editor who uh the the charitable view is that he didn't know that I was on it and gave it to a different writer. The not charitable view is that he had no interest in me being on it and fired me without telling me. I don't know which happened. I never got sort of a clear answer. It doesn't really matter. The point was that the book continued without me, and Stefano emailed me and was like, "I don't understand why you left our book. I was very excited to do it." And I said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And then made some frantic calls and found out that I wasn't going to be able to pay my bills that month. And Stefano, who's just a true gentleman and a great guy, was like, "Well, I took that book to do it with you." And um, he was like, "Well, we should do something. We should do a book for ourselves." And I said, "Yeah, I would love that." And it's always flattering when an artist asks you as a writer to do it, because usually it's, the
Yeah.
other way around. And he said, "Well, I have an idea for a story." And I said, "Oh, that even better. You're making my job easier every single email." And then I said, "Send it my way." And he sent me just a drawing of this robot. And I was like, "Cool, it's awesome. What's the story?" And he was like, "That's it. That's what I have. Like, I want to do that." And I was like, "Man, that's not a story. That's a robot." And it was a cool robot. And then I spent a couple weeks like hammering on ideas and sort of going into things I wanted to do. And I came back to him and I was like, "This is what I think it should be." And he was like, "Yeah, I really want to do like, I want to make sure the robot is like the main character." And it was a funny like sort of push and pull. And I was like, "Yeah, I don't really know how to do that book, man, that you want to do." And then it wasn't until issue 3 that I realized that like the robot is so fun in our book and such a cool thing, and Stefano just wants to see him do badass things and be a cool character, that I was like, "Oh man, he was probably right." Like I put so much of this other stuff in here, and I probably could have just been like, "Yeah, it's just a fun robot book," and we would have had a blast doing it. But I think the book is better because we're both sort of creatively pulling in slightly different directions, and so it's a mix of both of us in a really fun way. Um, but so the idea, he wanted to do this spy story and kind of a robot with a robot in it, like kind of a sexy spy thing. And I'm a huge James Bond fan. I love that stuff. I grew up on that stuff, but I also recognize how like absurd and problematic it is often. And so I was like, well, I love, I love the more grounded spy stuff that sort of come out post James Bond in a lot of ways, like like stuff like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy or The Quiet American, like these more grounded, or Queen and Country, like is a great book, and these more grounded approaches. But I don't think I'm a good writer for that. And we had a robot, and I was like, well, I don't know that the robot's gonna fit. And so
Like,
the
where does the robot fit in?
yeah, it's like, yeah, well, this is about the bureaucracy and paperwork of a spy agency, and also there's a robot who punches people. Just it doesn't fit exactly. I mean, maybe that book is awesome and I should have done that, but um I ended up being like, well, I want to sort of not dismantle because I love it, but I sort of want to like examine and poke at the James Bond idea of how absurd it is, but from the other side of making it more absurd and more crazy. And so that's sort of the impetus of the story. But then from there, I built it. A lot of it is built around this idea that I sort of think about a lot, and I think in the last few years especially, which is just the way that the media, that media in general, not just the media, not like just news, but also pop culture, sort of talks about violence and talks about uh, the way that violence interacts, it affects people, and it's always on a one-to-one basis. It's always a sort of perpetrator and victim basis, and that's not, in my experience, how violence works. It has ramifications, and it has a ripple effect that is generational, that is through families and neighbors and communities and so I wanted to sort of do a story about that. And once I had that and this robot spy thing, it became sort of it all sort of fell into place that the story is about it's set in this James Bondy world of sexy spies and mad and supervillains and stuff, but the book is about the daughter of the world's greatest mad scientist. And um, when violence sort of comes to her family in the form of this like global power struggle that she knows nothing about, it sort of sends her off on this path. And that's sort of the all the pieces of it that sort of make the book to start. It's funnier than it sounds, I promise.
No, it sounds great. I mean, like, honestly, all of that from, in essence, a visual writing prompt. It was just like, here's a robot. See what you can do with it. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's funny to look back on it because also the robot is not the same. Like he's changed it and evolved it, and yeah, it's a visual writing. It was a writing exercise basically, and now it's this thing that I'm just incredibly in love with and incredibly proud of, and I think Stefano is as well, and that's really fun to sort of have this weird origin for something that ends up being really special to you.
yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I enjoyed about it, and especially the first issue was there's so many different things about the characters that I both like and dislike, and especially the father, and um there are moments when I where he's just harsh and all this, and then there are moments when he turns around and he's tender and he seems to like really care about
Yeah,
it about his daughter, um and then even on the spy side is like, I think you like the these are the good guys. Like, it's just a lot of
yeah.
things that I'm just kind of that you're questioning throughout the story, and it's just really it's really interesting to have something that's entertaining but also kind of mature in how it and how it breaches its subjects. Like, I like things with layers, and I think that's one of the things that I'm enjoying about it.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I think yes, I really appreciate that. I think one of the things for us was like we want a book that does like four different things just because that's who we are. And like you only have so much time on this planet and I have a lot to say and Stefano has a lot to say. And so we want to make a comic that people are going to go to a shop and put $5 down and feel enjoy and have fun with. And so it's got jokes and it's got heart and it's got all these things. But we also, yeah, it's like it's a little scary, it's a little sad, and in that there's a lot of like moral nuance to
Yeah.
these characters. Um they're awful, and then they're also very much care about the people they care about, and they're also, are they good people who are driven to do awful things in the world? Are they awful people who are good to their families? Like those
Mhm.
are really interesting, I think, sort of in a time when everything is sort of treated as a binary, when we approach everything as good versus evil. Um, I think it's really not only boring to sort of do that, but I think it's there are places where it's good. I don't want a ambiguous Superman.
Mhm.
Superman is hope. Superman is positivity and optimism. Like I want Superman to be good, but I think we have those, but I think also like we can't just make everything like, well, the bad guys are bad guys and the good guys are good guys. It's just not, it doesn't work that way. Like our good guys are someone else's bad guys and vice versa. And that's something that I think people need to really understand. And it's sort of a theme in the book is just this idea of like a person raised without empathy, without ever thinking about other people, without ever knowing how to approach other people. Like, what does she become in the world? How can she learn it? Is it something that she's born with and it will be there? And so that's sort of that sort of moral ambiguity is kind of baked into the characters from start and will be something that we kind of explore as we go.
Yeah, it's kind of one of the things that I've always enjoyed about comics, and especially reading different types is kind of like my personal philosophy is that I love looking up at the sky and seeing hope there, but at the same time, I kind of like looking right in front of me, and sometimes I like looking down. I like
Yeah,
seeing like the things that are right in front of me that maybe I don't understand and I need to, and the things that I will never understand, but like
sure.
so entertaining to kind of enjoy. But at the same time, I still kind of want to have. That's the reason I talk about layers. I kind of like having those three kind of tiers of imagination.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not a fan. I never try and I don't really try and make there are the writers out there who are like, I make something for everyone. And like I don't believe in that. I think that things are not for everyone for the most part. Like everyone has different tastes and that's cool. And go find the things that you like and the things that speak to you. But with that said, like I think that even if something's not trying to be for everyone, there are things you should be putting into it to get out of people. Like you want people to grow and expand. So like this is a fun book. Like we tried to make a very fun book. So if you're a fun book person, there's a fun book there that's funny and exciting and cool and then but it also has these layers of moral complexity and the big themes that we're talking about and vice versa. Like if you want to see a writer struggle with sort of these moral ideas that are weighing on him a lot, like that's what we're doing, but also like a robot punches people's heads off and it's funny. Like, I don't know. We're trying to do both, I guess, is the point.
And there's a place for that for with everyone. Everyone's gonna find something about an element of that to enjoy. I mean, I kind of
Yeah.
like I said, I enjoy all of it, but along the same lines are again almost kind of a process question, but not really. But kind of like how do you? This is gonna sound so cliche, but when you're writing different books, like how do you kind of compartmentalize kind of what you're writing in the moment? Like is there something that's like, you know what, for the next couple of weeks, I'm in the we're taking everyone with me world. And then after that's over, then I'll jump into what's the furthest place from here land for a couple of weeks.
No, I mean, I wish that I could do that. The way deadlines work means that I don't really have that luxury that sometimes I'm writing two different books in an afternoon or whatever.
Mhm.
Less so now. I'm trying to do that less. I was really, I was a seven issue a month guy at Marvel and like six issues a month at DC, and that's um physically exhausting and I think probably creatively not where people are at their best. But I don't know. It's not people I've been asked that before of like, well, how do you get into this and how do you not let one book spill into the other? And I don't really have an answer other than it's just like a switch. When you sit down to do a job, I do it. It's not that different. I mean, I love my job and I love writing comics, but it's not that different than like if I have to go make dinner or I have to go do my taxes, I don't have to like sit down and be like, okay, it's dinner mode. Don't think about numbers, think about food. And then it's like, okay, it's tax time. Stop thinking about cheese. And like it's just like you sit down and do a job and you sort of fall into it is sort of the answer, which is not I mean, I have little things that I do, like sort of music that gets me in the mood or whatever for the characters in the book. I have playlists for books and stuff, but um it's not really more than that. I don't do anything else.
I think it's this, and being a fan and hanging with fans, for many years, ever since I was a kid. There's always been kind of this almost ephemeral, um, atmosphere when we think about, like writers and artists. Like there's this like a zone that they go through, and yeah, you kind of want to know that you know what, yeah, it's hard, like sometimes I'm not thinking about this, or
Sh-
sometimes this is all I can think about.
Sure, yeah. No, I mean, look, I've been a fan my whole life, so I totally get it, and I've had that sort of mystique stripped away from me many, many times. Like I was exclusive writer at Marvel for 5 years. Like I would go to the summits, and I'm sitting in a room with Brian Bendis and Mark Waid and Jason Aaron and Jonathan Hickman and Ta-Nehisi Coates and all these amazing writers that I look up to. And then at the end of the day, you're just like, yeah, they're just grinding on stories the same as everyone else. Like it's a job, and it's a great job, and we're all very lucky and privileged to have it, but it's a job, and it's not as much magic as we'd like it to be, I think. Which is a bummer. But it's a job. I always I think a lot about when I was trying to break in, they'd do a lot of like writers panels at comic. I mean, maybe they still do that. I don't know. I haven't been to a con in a while. But they used to do a lot of like how to write panels. And I remember I went to one and it was Brian K. Vaughan talking about writing, and someone was like, I struggle from writer's block a lot. Like, what's your trick? And Brian K. Vaughan gave an answer that I think really, not to steal his response, but I'm gonna steal it, whatever. But it's really stuck with me and helped me in my career a lot, which is that he was just like, there's no workaround for it. It's a job. A job has easy parts and hard parts. Like if you're building a building, like there's parts that you love, but like picking up and moving concrete is probably not one of them. But like, you know, laying in the final piece and stepping back and looking at the building is great, but like lugging steel beams around is not. And he was like, that's the same as writing. There's parts that are awesome, and there's parts that your brain doesn't want to do, that are you're straining your brain. It's a muscle that you're struggling with. And he was like, there are things I do to get through them, but like you can't defeat that. It's a job. It has hard parts. Like every job has hard parts. Every job has parts you don't want. And I think about that a lot of just like, there's days when it doesn't come easy, and there's days where you know, you spend 14 hours staring at the same page because it won't work. And I don't have a trick for that. I don't have any special thing. I have a just when I'm gonna slam into it until it breaks down and I'm done with it. Um, and yeah, it's not romantic. It's not it's not magical, but it's still the best job I've ever had. So I'm not complaining, but it is a job.
Well, that's one of the things where it's probably one of the reasons why I respect writers so much is because yeah, it's a job, but at the same time, you're still creating something that hasn't been in the world before. So I think that's the reason why I kind of look at, I mean, the whole reason why it's the superpowered fan cast is because I don't like, I don't see the need in kind of not liking things like just because if there's something that doesn't connect with me, I'm sure it'll connect with somebody else.
Sure, yeah.
So it's just the reason why I've never felt the need to just kind of say, oh, this is horrible and all
Yeah.
that. I just
Th-
it's
There's
something new. It's something I didn't do. So
yeah.
it's definitely something I can say, well, you know what, this was created out in the world, and maybe I don't maybe it didn't connect with me, but somebody else is going to pick it up one day and say, wow, this is the thing that I connect with.
100%. I always think about the fact that there's more books in the world that I want to read than I'll ever be able to. There's more comics in the world. There's more movies. There's more TV shows. There's more paintings than I'll ever be able to see. There's more sculptures than I'll ever be able to see. And I'm kind of like, yeah, I don't know why I would spend a lot of time thinking about ones that I don't like. Like I mean, it actually honestly makes me sad when people are like, dwelling on a thing. Like I'm a huge Star Wars nerd. Like I've been a huge Star Wars nerd my whole life, and like there's some of the shows I don't like as much as others. I'm a huge Andor fan. I loved Skeleton Crew, and then some of the other ones that like they didn't connect with me, and I was just like, okay, it's not. I hope it connects with someone else. I hope someone else loves it as much as I love Andor, or as much as I love Empire Strikes Back. I want people to like things. I want people to care about things. I don't need to care about everything. Like I just move on. And I think the people who don't do that, like, need to sit down and figure out like why they're not seeking out things they care about more than why they're obsessing on things they don't. Like it's just, I don't know. It's very strange to me. It's very alien.
Well, I personally love to hear about passion more than hatred. I want to hear
Yeah.
the things that you enjoy and the reasons why you enjoy them, whether I'm connected to them or not. So that's
Yeah.
just,
Oh, sure.
but
100%. I love Tyler Boss, who I made Four Kids Walk No Bank with, and who I make What's the First Place from Here. He's one of my best friends in the whole world, and he's a huge football guy. He's a huge Buffalo Bills fan and a football obsessive. And I've just never been a football fan. And I love talking to him about it because it's like, yeah, he's just so passionate and it's exciting. And like, I'll go to his house and hang out and watch games with him. And he's just so intense about it. And it's just fun. And I'm just like, I don't really care. I'm not going to go home and care more about the game after. I'm not going to have a team that I root for particularly, but I also like it's fun to watch people be invested in things. It's
Yeah.
fun to see people be passionate and it's infectious and it's great. And yeah, it's the greatest thing in the world when people care about things.
And going back to oh, sorry, going back to we're taking everyone down with us.
Yeah,
Kind of what just because in my talking to other people about it before I even got a chance to talk to you about it, I kind of told him, well, this kind of this weird kind of hybrid spy robot thing, and but what do you kind of want people to get out of, at the very least, the first issue? I don't want to put it
sure.
all first. Is like, what do you want people to get out of the series? But from the first issue, kind of what do you want that reader to pick up and kind of get out of
Yeah, I mean, really, not to follow up on the last question, but really, the only thing I care about is that people enjoy it. Like, I hope they enjoy it. Um, I'm a pretty big I'm of two minds of it. It's something that's the book is very personal to me and to Stefano, and it's something we made and we sort of made for ourselves. And so if anyone picks it up and likes it, that's awesome. That's such a amazing, precious thing to us. Like it's such there's a weird feeling of connectivity to make something that feels very personal to you and have someone else be like, I like this. That feels like this very real connection. When people come up and say they care about something I made, like it really does feel like, oh, a kindred spirit in some way. Like that, and that's awesome. And that's something I think, it's a feeling I wish I could share with more people, the idea of just like connectivity with strangers and finding people who you have a shared common experience or common feelings on things. But also I'm a big believer in the fact that like when I make it and I put it out into the world and when I make it and it's me and Stefano, it's ours. And then when Image prints it and sends it to thousands of comic shops, it's
it?
not ours anymore. And I never would want, I want people to get what they want out of it. I want when they lay down the money to buy something, if they want it to be fun, like cool, I really hope they have fun with it. If they want it to be like very intense and powerful book, I hope it is for them. If they want a distraction for 20 minutes, I hope it's that distraction for 20 minutes. Like I don't have expectations other than I hope when like I've been broke. I know what it is to be broke and be a comic book fan. I understand what a dollar, spending your dollars on it is. I just hope people feel like they get their money's worth, I guess is the end of the day. Like that's my baseline. Is like I hope you're not mad you bought the book.
That's
It's a low bar, but
no, it makes perfect sense. Um, let's have like it's two more like just kind of quick things. And one thing again, I always ask comic book writers, and this more is really just more for me. Like without without telling me what it is there just in your career you've written for Marvel, you've written for DC. Is there a character that you enjoy that you would have wanted to write for but didn't get an opportunity? And tell me what the character is, but don't tell me what the story is. Or if you wanted to, you can, but just kind of why this character is somebody you think you had a story that could resonate for him.
sure. Um, I mean, it's hard because I've written a lot of books, and so there's not a lot like if you're like, well, did I ever write that character? I've written at least a few pages of almost all of the ones that I super care about. Um, so that's tricky. Like I can't. There aren't a ton that I can pinpoint where I'd be like, I've never written them. So with that in mind, I think Uh, I had more that I wanted to do with Hawkeye, and I did write Hawkeye in a bunch of books, but like that's just a character that I love so completely and would love to do. And weirdly, even though he's a very different character, Green Arrow on the other side, Green Arrow is one that I love, and he's one of the leads in DC versus Vampires, so it's not like I don't write him currently,
Mhm.
but I have a Green Arrow story that um, I would love to do at some point, and those are big ones for me. Um, I'm trying to think if there's something else that really like, not really. Like I not. I mean, the big one for me that I've never done, on my Mount Rushmore and my Hall of Fame of the characters that I wish I could write. Like, it's like it's Batman, it's X-Men, it's Punisher, it's Green Arrow, it's Archie. Um, and the only one I haven't done is G.I. Joe. Like G.I. Joe is like a dream book for me. I would love to do G.I. Joe someday, but I'm pretty busy right now.
Yeah.
So and the G.I. Joe books are so good right now that I'm kind of like, no, you guys just go do your thing. Like Josh Williamson and everyone who's making those is doing so good that like, um, I don't want to step in and be like, I'm here. I'm happy being a fan, but someday a G.I. Joe book is sort of my dream thing to do.
Cool. That's cool. I would read it.
Oh,
I've been reading so many just kind of resurgence of like comics from when I was a kid. Like
yeah, yeah,
I'm reading David Propose's Space Ghost, and
sure.
I'm reading Joe Casey's Johnny Quest and
Yeah, yeah.
Silverhawks and all that. So and Thundercats and all the rest of them. So
Yeah,
yeah.
the Silverhawks is so funny to me because Ed Brisson, who writes Silverhawks, is one of my best friends, and he was just like he said to me like 2 years ago, he's like, yeah, he's at a place where he's like he's doing other stuff outside comics. Got other writing gigs, and so he's like, I'm kind of just focusing on my own stuff. He's like, I spent enough time writing at Marvel and DC. I just want to make my own stuff. And I said to him like literally 2 years ago, I was like, there's nothing that would draw you back to doing it. And he was like, just Silverhawks. And I was like, Silverhawks, dude. And he's like, I loved it so much. He's like, Silverhawks is so important to me. And I was like, really, dude, Silverhawks? And he was like, yeah. And then like a year later, he's like, they just called me about Silverhawks. And I was like, how? How does that happen? Like, what are the odds that you would get tapped for that? But I mean, I think he put in the work to make it happen. But yeah. And then the book is awesome. I read the
It
first
is. Yeah.
the start and it's great. And I was like, oh, I literally never cared about this at all. Like I remember the cartoon, didn't care about it, didn't knew the toys, didn't like them. But the book, I'm like, oh no, I get it. He wanted to kill it on Silverhawks and he's doing it.
Yeah. And then my final question, if you wanted people to follow you, because I definitely read your Substack, so I was
Oh,
gonna
thanks.
put that link there. But if you wanted people to follow you on social media, where can they find you? And believe me,
I mean,
they don't have to. You can literally say
yeah.
I don't want them to.
No,
But
look, if you're on there, one, don't be on there, but don't listen to me because I'm on all of that. But I have the same on everything, which is Ashcan Press, ASHCANPRESS. And so I have a Twitter, which is awful. I have a Facebook, which is pretty awful. I have an Instagram, which is slightly less awful, and I have a Blue Sky, which is fine. Um, I kind of am just like, I just don't. They feel very bad to me. Like they feel like bad places at this point. Like they're just so angry and hateful, and um, so I don't ever do that. I'm always just like, well, I'm just gonna post either stuff about comics or positivity, and like, I'm never gonna, you know, I have my friends to sit there and get upset with and talk to. I don't need to dump it on the public, unfiltered. But then I have a newsletter which is the same, ashcanpress.com, and we make a podcast, which is bad, but we do it anyway. And yeah, that's probably the best place is just, if you don't mind getting another email, go to ashcanpress.com and sign up. And we don't send too many, and we send a podcast every week, and they're pretty fun and pretty stupid, but you know, you don't have to listen to them.
Well, thank you so much, Matthew. I really appreciate you coming on. I really am getting a little flustered. I really did enjoy the first issue, and
Oh, thanks.
your explanation of it is something that's really kind of drawn me into the series. Like usually I'm a first issue guy. Like if I read something in the first issue catches my attention, I'll jump to the second one. And I usually kind of just again, even as a fan, I still but comics I give you 3 issues to hook me. And if
That's a lot, but sure.
just to be fair.
Yeah.
But if if I'm not into it after the third issue, I just kind of drop it. I just kind of drop it. But I'm definitely into this, and I appreciate
Oh,
you taking the time
thanks.
to talk to me.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate you letting me come on. I know I just bugged you and said, hey, can I come on your show and talk
No,
about my
no,
book?
absolutely no. Here's the thing: I want more people to do that because I am horrible at reaching out to people because I always think no one's going to want to talk to me. So I appreciate anyone that just kind of says, "Hey, I want to talk to you about this."
No, it's great. I had a super fun time. Um it's my last day before I go on a big trip, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be fun. And it was great. So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Um, Once again, I want to thank Matthew Rosenberg for being on the Fancast this month. We're Taking Everyone Down With Us is coming this March from Image Comics, and I recommend you check it out. As always, please let me know what you think of the episode in the comments, and you can always read more news and reviews at my website, superpoweredfancast.com, or find me on social media on Instagram at superpoweredfan, on Twitter at superpoweredfan, on Blue Sky at superpoweredfancast, or on TikTok at superpoweredfancast. This is Darren from the Superpowered Fancast, signing off till next time.